All right, guys. Welcome to the third episode of the TCG Core podcast. I know it's been a little while. Life has just been keeping everybody busy, but we're here now. This is probably perfect timing because BT12 should be coming out probably the week after this goes up, or maybe pre-release will be the week after. Whatever the case,
Release is this Sunday.
Oh, there we go. BT12 is around the corner. A lot of stuff to cover. But before we do any of that, how have you guys been? I feel like it's been a minute since we've all kind of like connected.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely been a little bit of a lull, but good though. I mean it's the extended period of BT11 that we've had is still been enlightening. Trying to find like new stuff to play and try to still like every past format, right? We just try to find different interesting stuff to play. So it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah, I've definitely had a bunch of life stuff going on, which is fun. And besides that, I feel like lately I've been doing a lot more casual gaming than I have been. So I rebuilt Gamamon. I've been tweaking a couple like pet decks like Pulsemon as well. So trying to prep for some stuff, trying to look to the future. But as this format winds down and we prep for the second round of regionals, I feel like I've definitely taken a step back and just played more for fun games than I have like practice.
That's fair. Yeah, I feel like I've just been, y'all from the stream know, and both of y'all know, I've just been playing the hell out of Dragon Ball Super. Like that has become like all consuming because I feel like I would just go insane if I kept playing BT11. And y'all know I can't play anything casually. Like I don't know how to do that. So that doesn't help. The competitive spirit in me is too strong. Speaking of competitive, we haven't had a chance to even really talk about I don't even really want to call it a ban list. But I know we mentioned it before, I believe in our last episode. Do you guys have any immediate thoughts or impressions that have kind of stuck with you now that we've had like almost 2 weeks, or just over 2 weeks since the ban list became like official, and kind of like the new world order?
Okay, this is my first hot take of the night. It's probably gonna be many more. I'm perfectly fine with it. I think we had a lot of speculation in the last episode when we talked about was like what did we think was gonna be, or what did we what was gonna be warranted. Obviously, it's no surprise to anybody that all we got was the Greymon X, right? The BT11 one. Definitely strong card. I definitely think it was warranted. There was a couple other things that people were like, oh, this should have that, whatever. I'm fine with it. I really am, because it allowed us to see, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, later down, but it allowed other decks that got very heavily gate kept because of just what Black War did as an archetype, to allow them to like reflourish, I would say. So yeah, I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't think that it was unwarranted. I don't think it was. There's other things that made the other decks more unfair or whatever. I think I'm perfectly cool with the ban list that we got.
I feel like I haven't been part of the TCG community in a minute, which was really fun for this ban list because it kept getting bigger and bigger. The more people I talked to, the more people had a hot take on what was gonna go and what was on the list, and like, oh, but I've been thinking this. It was a little underwhelming at first to be hit with a single card. Looking forward to new Metal Greymon. Fully understand why they hit it. Both of those targets being available, dumb. So it felt more like future proofing when I actually read it and then looked towards BT11 than it did like a ban list. Like, this is really strong. We're gonna hit it. I played it one night at full power. I was talking to a couple friends. We jammed like 12 games. I played Black War Greymon for most of it. So I'm like, I haven't played it. Do you guys just mind? And they're like, last night's legal. You can play it. So that was fun. The deck feels really good. I can definitely say I feel like I understand its power level now, bouncing off a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, it felt more like future-proofing than a ban list, and I feel like it's affected me. The thing they implemented on April 1st, I feel like has wildly affected me more than the ban list has.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me, it was just like, I'm not surprised, but I guess I was more surprised just based on how everybody had like crazy dream lists about what should be hit, you know, and like between X antibody itself, which I'm like, that don't make any sense because if you look at BT12, there's enough X antibody cards coming out. It's like, why would you shoot that in the foot? The only thing that surprised me, honestly, was like Cool Boy, just because I feel like it enables so many shenanigans, specifically for that deck, but for like every X antibody deck. And to your point about future proofing, like that's the only one that surprised me that it wasn't touched at all. But who knows? Maybe it will be in the future when it's like abused again in some way, shape, or form, which it will be. I mean, it will probably forever be used in anything with X antibody. But yeah, I am both surprised and not. And I think to your point, it's all about future proofing at that point. Because if you look at BT12 and EX4, there's so much Greymon specific stuff coming out that like that card would just makes Greymon like tier 0 type of thing for like ever. Because anytime they printed a level 5, well, anything with Greymon in the name, it would just be too good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it really, anything 2 color was going to get a 2 cost reduction, and you could even argue a 1 cost reduction on a lot of Digivolves is still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things where like it's so easy to see where they're coming from now that you see it.
Yeah.
Before predicting the ban list was wild, and it's your take on the meta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that, you know, again, looking back on it, like you guys were saying, I think what really made that card as unbalanced as it was, not just now, but especially like you guys were saying, future proofing, was the fact that it had 2 incredibly broken effects. Whereas if it had one or the other, maybe it wouldn't have been as bad, right? Because it could have been a little bit more balanced. Whereas like, you know, the BT9 Greymon X gives us the protection, right? Or like a Deltamon gives us the cost reduction, right? So it's like you'd have to choose like what you value more. Oh, I don't need to choose now. I just have Greymon X, the BT10 one, or the BT11 one, sorry. And I think that was their way of saying we did make a mistake because we realized like, oh yeah, having that cost reduction paired with the protection, like it literally just like trumps, like I said, it gatekeeps all these other like actual viable decks, but that just can't stand up to that. So yeah, I do think to your guys' point, I think that being able to say, yeah, this card just needs to go. Honestly, as far as the Cool Boy hit, it's funny because I'm glad we're actually talking about this as late as we are now, because I think my opinion would have been a little bit different if we would have like talked about it immediately after, because now we get to see at least like a 2-week span after it's happened. And looking back on it, I'm like, I don't think Cool Boy was that broken, because we passed Ulti Cup format, right? We're back into regional stuff, so regular decks are getting played. You don't see as much Melga, right? Even when you do, it's really not as OP as it used to be. There's a lot of cross art, doesn't touch Cool Boy. Grandis, even though it's got X antibody stuff in there, doesn't use Cool Boy. So in my opinion, it's like the only deck that really abused Cool Boy was Black War, but you nerf Black War just by that one hit. So really, if you were to hit Cool Boy, you're really nerfing not just whatever could use Cool Boy right now, but anything in the future, right? This way, you're only saying the Greymon archetype that it, like Agent said to his point, is going to get more support indefinitely in the future because it's Greymon. We get to keep that in check rather than just saying we're just going to nerf the entire X antibody archetype as a whole indefinitely, right? And look, like I said, looking back on it now, I think it makes more sense.
It's really funny because I thought about this with the All Force X antibody. It wasn't about like we talked about so many decks that could abuse it. I saw way more War Gray X, like just regular afterwards with Cool Boy, still kind of using it. And granted, here and there, not always using it, but sometimes. I love the idea that they might start testing these X antibody decks where like, okay, we know All Force is really good. What if we just give you All Force X antibody? We're not going to give you Vidramon, Vmon, all that. We're going to give you the top end X antibody. We'll see how that is, and then we can kind of balance from there. Seems to be what I think like some of these new X antibody types going forward are going to do.
Yeah, that's a smart way to do it. You know, just make it like a top piece instead of you. And it's, I think for deck building, it makes it a little more diverse, because it's like, okay, now I'm not required to have like 4 Agumons and 4 Agumon X's, and like you can kind of like swap that out with something else. It's nice specifically for Cool Boy. It's nice because like if I do that, that's the only reason I would put the card in the deck, is because it's not the top end. It's all the pieces leading up to the top end that I would use it. So yeah, that's a good point. You know, like for me, it's like, well, I play a bunch of Greymon shit, so like for me, like Cool Boy still feels pretty like viable to use all the time. But for like everybody else, it's like, yeah, it's like it's a nice additive, but it's almost like you know, Dan and I have talked about with Dark Gaia Force, no, not Dark Gaia Force, Hades Force, where like
Force, yeah.
that card is so specific that hitting it is like, why would you do that? Like it requires so many things to be like useful. Cool Boy, from a certain perspective, I can see that being like the case, right? Where it's so viable for certain anybody play styles and not all of them.
Yes, yep. That's perfect way to put it. Whereas the Greymon X, again, it's just all Greymons for all time. So it's like, you know, with no restriction. It's not like Greymon in its name except for Dextoru or Burning. It's literally just Greymon in the name. You know, so so that I do. I think you know, being able to say cards that operate outside of the limits that they were probably intended to, that those are the ones that end up needing to go.
Yeah.
I know in an X antibody deck, color doesn't always matter per se, but I wonder if that card would have been hit if it was just a pure black Greymon X antibody. Like the fact that they also gave it red, the fact that you could go into it in your raising area and use Hades Force because you have both represented. I wonder if that one would have seen as big a hit if it would have just been pure black.
Probably not. I mean, like, yeah, I think the dual color nature of it is what makes it so effing good. I mean, just look
extra. There's all these little extras.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at deck building, so you and I put it in my Discord for BT12. Y'all know I'm making like 20 different Greymon builds, but like because of the dual color nature, like you have an almost unlimited card pool now, for Greymon stuff, and like that's kind of absurd. I love it. I know some people hate it, but it is what it is. But like, yeah, I think that if it was just one color, it may not have been as bad.
Yeah, because we can see, I mean, ever since dual colors were introduced in the game with what now over a year and a half now, even more that the dual colors have just been a thing. And I don't mean like you've had dual color evolutions for even longer than that, right? With single color that could, but actual dual colors that enable so many powerful, whether it's options or tamers or interactions or whatever the case may be. Yeah, Farley, you make a good point that it's like, what if it was a monocolor? You know, at least right now, like I do think black based stuff, especially like specifically for Greymon, is going to get even stronger in the future. But right now, with the current state of everything, black based Greymon, we all know is not as strong. It's not as strong comparably to red, right? So if you would have said, hey, we're gonna just make it a black Greymon X to kind of go through that archetype, yeah, would it have been as strong or would it have been as big of a problem? Maybe not. You know.
Yeah, at least not for BT11, right? I mean, going forward, probably, because we're getting to that point of like dual color everything. But yeah, for the format, it may not have been. But kind of like moving a little bit, unless anybody has any final thoughts on or additional thoughts for that. Mulligans are here. I mean, I know we all are happy about mulligans, but like, who wants to share that joy first?
I mean, I the worst thing about mulligans so far is that I feel like a noob setting up my board. I have made more mistakes putting security down or anything else for it, or not deciding who goes first before we do anything, because now I'm just used to it. So I feel like a noob. So that's fun to go back to basics, but man, does this feel like this could have been here the whole time. I think my only disappointment is how many people in the game or approaching the game saw a mulligan, didn't see a mulligan. It was like, cool, I'm out. I can play Dragon Ball. I can play so many other games that have a mulligan. Why would I lock myself into like really tight deck building? And now I can't imagine not playing with it. It feels great. I think obviously it lets you mess with your ratios a little bit. I've still kept with a lot of my similar ratios, but I find my deck firing more consistently just because I have that choice. What I like about the mulligans, and like a quick bullet point, is like it makes you feel like deck building can go a little crazy. We're going to see security control. We're going to see really strange decks coming out, I can almost guarantee. Two, for a casual player or like anyone getting into a competitive side, feels so much better than being locked into games where you have 3 level 5s in a hand. Sometimes you could play through it. Great. Now you don't necessarily have to. And the third and like final thing about mulligans is just like it just feels like it's about time. I'm glad they've done enough testing with it. I'm glad that Bandai is very willing to test things out, but also like not willing to like implement things hard. It feels like it took us forever to get it, but I'm also glad that they like took the time to be like, because our old mulligan was supposed to be take the top 5 in security, then take 5. Look at your hand. Do you want it? No. Put it to the bottom of the deck, then draw 5. So we were getting knowledge about what was at the very bottom of our deck, and we were just taking the next 5, so no chance of shuffling in, taking any of those back into hand. I don't. I feel like this system just feels a lot more fair as well.
Yeah. I think I'll kind of echo Asian's point early on. Is I've with kind of this quote unquote lull of BT11 for a little bit. I've also ventured into Dragon Ball Super, and comparatively to that game, Dragon Ball Super has mulligans. Well, I started doing that prior to the rule set actually it was announced, but it wasn't actually implemented in Digimon yet. So I actually tried out mulligans first with Dragon Ball, and immediately, like, I knew about it coming to Digimon. Being able to try it out in Dragon Ball got me that much more excited for it, because for all your points, it's like, yeah, like I feel like I can actually play the game, rather than when a game is so heavily dependent on RNG. In a lot of cases, I just draw my first 5 cards, realize I have a dead hand, I draw 5, I go through 5 turns of still dead drawing. I'm never going to get to play out of that. Can that still happen with you mulligan? Sure. But I think to that point that is why I love the way that they did the mulligans, right? Because you were saying, before you firstly you're out your security, so that's 5 cards you won't have access to at all, right? If you're talking probabilities and things like that, you'll never be able to have access to those 5, right? So being able to draw your first 5 cards, that means all 50 cards you have a probability of having them in your hand, right? Because there's some cards you just don't want at security. If you have a 1 of something, or if you have that one limited Greymon X, you don't want that in security, right? So it's like being able to have it structured this way, and then again not having to just bottom deck everything. Because again, it's one of those things. I know we went through this in the Jessmon days, right? Where it's like, man, I do need to mulligan this hand, but I don't want to send 3 of my savior hooks to the bottom. But it's like, well, I can mulligan that even though I have 3 of them in my hand, because I'm going to shuffle. So there's still a potential of me drawing into 1 or 2 of them, rather than knowing that all 3 are on the bottom and being forced to keep that hand. So I think, again, I'll just say exactly what Frawley said. It was a long time coming. I think they should have done this a lot sooner. I think because it would have made the game a lot more attractive to newer players, or players coming in from other games who have experienced mulligans and do prefer them. Because I don't know, aside from still having to relearn opening steps, I don't know if I could go back to non-mulligans anymore, because I feel more like you said, I feel more comfortable and more confident in my deck building, which I'm a less than, I wouldn't say a strong deck builder anyway. So I feel more confident in I'll throw that one thing in there. I have a more chance of things like that. So yeah, I'm totally for mulligans. I could never see going back.
100%. And the thing with the mulligans, I like that they're actually not too OP. And what I mean, not to say they're OP right now, but they didn't take it a step further, which would have been a la Dragon Ball and some other games where you could pick which cards you send back, because that, I think, for Digimon would get out of hand really fast. Because cool, I'll keep my level 6, 5, 4 or whatever. I'll keep certain pieces that I need to my win cons. I like that it's no, you start over, you try again. And I also feel for deck building, to you guys' point, it makes it so that you can be a little more experimental, but also the decks that people are oh, you just hide roll to win that game, whatever, Jessmon. People like to say that Jessmon is a you don't have to think deck, and that's a whole other thing, but I'm sure I have a hot take about that. But with Jessmon, and decks like it, or even Ancient Greymon, they become more viable now, right? Because cool, I can shuffle and try again. So I really like that it kind of makes certain decks that were more dicey to play just because of RNG, not because the deck is bad. It's just I mean, it's just the probability. So yes to everything you guys said. Yes.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned Jessamon specifically, because it does feel like a deck that tries to run a lot of white in a deck that can't digivolve or utilize it as well as other decks can. Um, and as annoying as Jessamon has been, I feel like it deserves a fair shake.
Yeah.
Like it deserves that chance of not being stuck with it. I fully agree with not keeping cards, because you just, if we're this ladder focused on Digimon, you're just going to encourage more and more ladder sinking. And it's I feel like it's I mean, everyone's touched on it. They just tactfully added something that should have been there forever. But what makes the game feel more fair, even if it like, honestly, you don't give yourself that much a better chance. Like, you're just gonna shuffle up the same 50 cards. You're gonna draw 5, and hopefully those 5 are better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it leads to hopefully things not building in like a really loose cannon way. I hopefully, I haven't seen a glaring flaw with the mulligan on how you could stack it. Much like with Pokemon, where you need a basic Pokemon. So, or like an eligibility to keep your hand. I really like that, because that's the number one thing I think people brought up about mulligans was like, oh, I just need a rookie. Not seeing a rookie in my opening hand feels super bad, and I fully agree. But the idea of like having a starter rookie or something that was always available, it adds all these other factors of abusability. And I think just the fact of like, nope, put it back, draw 5 again, you're just gonna try again. So far it feels the most fair. We haven't noticed any problems yet.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say that in the short time that we've been doing it, I do like that, because again, I come from playing Pokemon for a long time, and it's weird with Pokemon because you have to have that quote unquote eligibility requirement, because you literally can't start the game without a basic Pokemon. But to that same point, you could say I have my opening 7, I have my 1 basic, but then 6 dead cards. Like, I literally can't do anything with. So there's still the chance of that, right? Same way, that's a whole nother like discussion in and of itself. But to relate it to how we do mulligans with us, I do like the fact that it isn't, to Agent's point, it's not like Dragon Ball where it's like, well, I'm just going to cherry pick what I want, or in order for me to qualify keeping this mulligan, I get to have a rookie, like to open it up, or a tamer even to like, fix my whatever. It's like, nope, I just didn't like this one, I'm just going to re-roll and try my chances again. It just basically gives you almost like in video game terms, a second life, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that was the whole thing, and I like that, because it again, it just opens up the possibility of saying I won't get like deflated literally just drawing my opening 5. Yeah, you open your second 5 and it's just that bad, well then, hey man, it is an RNG game, you got to deal with it. But at least you have that opportunity, which, yeah, I think they balanced it the best way they could. And thinking back on it, it's like maybe we needed to go through that time of no mulligan, our first version of mulligan, no mulligan again, for them to be like, this is the mulligan that I think is going to work the best. We're going to try this long term and see how it works.
Yeah, and I think this too adds something, and this is probably a segment we could start doing, like maybe not now, but of like game psychology, right? Of like, what is it that you need to see in your hand for you to be like, okay, cool, I am comfortable starting the game with this deck. Like, for me with Examon, it's like, I need to see Groundramon. If I see Groundramon in my hand, I'm probably keeping the entire hand, because it's like that weird personal thing where I feel like, and you've seen it happen, Dan, where like, I can't draw him. Where like, he's like, he is the one that just doesn't show up in my hand. And I think that for deck builders, there's gonna be kind of like these segments of cards where you go, okay, what are the cards that I really need to make sure that, like, if I have to mulligan, like, these are my prerequisites. I need to at least see these things, and if I don't see them, I know I should mulligan. Now that of course comes with like testing and all that, but I feel like that level of psychology of like thinking about how to play a deck hasn't existed necessarily in Digimon in the same way like it does in other games, like specifically Dragon Ball, or even like Yu-Gi-Oh, because it's like, okay, with Yu-Gi-Oh, I know I'm looking for a specific card to start my entire combo, right? I feel like with Digimon, it's like that, but it's not, because it's so piece reliant with almost every single deck. Now when you're building decks, you can kind of think about it a little differently, I think, anyway.
Yeah, and you actually touched on a perfect point too. Is it's like that? I think that's why with like a game like Digimon, you can't have a quote unquote hand requirement like Pokemon has, right? Because again, Pokemon requires that because that's literally how you start the game. Whereas Digimon, we could play the exact same deck. You know, you play Xmon, I play Xmon, but what you want to see could be different than what I feel like I'm comfortable seeing, right? So in order to say, well, you know, you might say, I don't need a rookie in my hand. Yeah, it'd be nice to see, but I don't need it as long as I have these other couple pieces. Where I'm like, no, I have to have a rookie, because if I don't have a rookie, I feel like because that's how I play the deck, right? Or, you know, and again, and then the other aspect of it too is deck building skills, right? So like how you deck build to achieve those desired results. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting subject of, you know, of game psychology when it comes to determining what is acceptable for you versus, you know, what could be acceptable for somebody else. So again, being able to just balance it kind of across the board and say, here's a blanket statement. Everybody gets a free pass to say, don't like it, re-roll, get started. You know, and I think that's the fairest way to do it.
I will play devil's advocate, or like the contrarian, for a moment too, because I think about when cards are really abusable. I went to a regional when Jet Sylvie was fully unlimited with a yellow hybrid deck that ran full red babies and like 4 Crimson Blaze, 4 Gaia Forces.
Degenerate. No.
oh yeah, like 4 Eden's Javelins. I don't know why I keep saying 6. Like super options, and I ran like cool hybrid to Sylphie to Ophani to get that recovery, and then like swing and get a level 4 back. That's the only deck I ran in locals, and like at a locals near me, I cleaned house in like 2 back-to-back like locals and like semi-champion, like not store championship, but like pre-releases and stuff. Then going to my regional, I got stomped. I got absolutely kicked by Blue Hybrid 2 rounds in a row. And the only thing I was upset about was consistency, because that deck only ran 4 of the promo Guillaumons and like 2 Flame Mons, because it was searchable by Zoe. And I remember being like, I'm adding consistency, but man, if I could mulligan, oh, like this is a hand. So stuff like Bielstar, stuff like that I feel like also though is going to become more and more tempting to people. They're like, oh, I run 12 option cards that are all 7 costs, so it can be very bricky hands, but we have a mulligan, so like sometimes I can just squeeze out at least 1 rookie or 1 Eismon, and get going. Yeah,
but you know what's interesting about that, right? In a best of 3 format instead of a best of 1, which is a whole. I've had way more experience with best of 1s from the Dragon Ball games I played, like the regionals and shit. That's like a whole other like mental process that I'm still trying to grasp, because you know in DBS, like you know what your opponent's playing off rip, right? So that like is totally different than Digimon, where like you have no idea. You can guess based on like their sleeves, but like you have no actual idea. And like the interesting thing about that is, okay, let's say you're playing a Bielstarmon. Game 2, I know this information. So now when I'm mulliganing, I'm thinking about what do I need to shut you down. So like if I'm playing War Greymon, I need that War Greymon, the BT1 one in my hand off rip just to have, so I can be like, okay, cool, here's my level 6. Or I need the Madoki Betamon to shut down any type of memory gain. So like that I think is also super interesting about mulligans, is like you can literally in game 2 onward say, while this may not be ideal, I need to look for this other card in order to have a chance against these more annoying, shall we say, decks, because we don't have side decks, but this mulligan kind of gives you an opportunity to, if you have those one-ofs, to look for them, or if you have those outs that you put into the deck, to look for them, or at least hope you get them in the second try, which I think is just interesting, again, going into like the psychology of the game, you know, that wasn't an option before.
Yeah, because it makes it almost, in that case, a skill-based thing, right? Because now you really have like you like the whole point of playing any TCG, regardless of any, you know, platform, whatever, is it's a strategy-based environment, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm playing against an opponent. We're trying to count moves and counter moves, right? That's basically it's based what it's upon. So to your exact point, it's like, yeah, that first game I'm gonna have to kind of navigate my best way through it, but game 2 on, now I have that information. I can start thinking a little bit more strategically on how can I counter move against certain things. So yeah, I do. I think overall mulligans, just they add more creativity with deck building. They do add a little bit more skill-based strategy in the game, and then yeah, also I think it expands, like Agent said again, just on top of the whole the psychology of the game as a whole. And it in a weird, maybe hot takey type of way of saying it, it not delegitimizes, but it counteracts the glass cannon, like I'm just gonna, like OTK type of, like I'm just gonna stack and beat you, versus the more combo-y or the more control-y thing. I feel like it gives us a much wider range of archetypes, and it prevents staleness, I would say, in the game, because it allows for that uniqueness for decks, you know.
We talked about why mulligans feel good, and like you're saying, digging for outs. It's becoming more about player prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
What do I prioritize in my deck? And that does feel good, because even if you're a rookie rusher and you need to see rookies, if you're a tower builder and you need to see tower, I like that the mulligan does give you the option of, this is not what I prioritize in my deck, so I'm drawing again. It's less about finding specific stuff and like, what does the player prioritize?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
100%. To that point, and kind of like going deeper into the new stuff that we haven't seen on the US side, but is around the corner from Japan. I don't even know. I think that I'm a good prognosticator. My skills of prediction are SAT word. My skills of prediction. Counters, man. We got we got counters. I don't know about y'all, but I'm excited, man. Especially after playing Dragon Ball Super. This Blast Evolution shit seems really cool, and I like that there's a drawback that's very. What is that going to look like? Because is it going to be as cool as it sounds when people start stripping sources and you lose memory because they stripped out your ace Digimon? Anybody want to take the floor on this first? I feel like I'm too excited to just like have like clear lines of thought.
I mean, one of the Dragon Ball players gotta go first. Like, this is a Dragon Ball thing.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't classify myself as a Dragon Ball player yet, but like the experience that I've had with it, the cool thing is being able to have experience with multiple TCGs now that do operate very differently. I like it. I really do. I know, I can't speak on the whole Yu-Gi-Oh environment. I know people have their opinions on that, and like there's them, whatever. But for me, I like games that I actually feel like I'm interacting with my opponent. Again, I as a callback to what I just said, when you play a TCG, I want to play with somebody. Like, it's not, I'm not going out there doing like a basketball shoot around where it's just me and a hoop. You know what I mean? Like, the reason I get into a game with somebody is to play with, and to feel like there's a give and take, right? And yeah, people have their own opinions on hand traps or counter this and whatever, but it's like, that's just, again, it's one extra additional layer to the game that now I have to account for, right? So what does that do? It, again, just kind of reiterating everything, it brings up the skill issue, and it brings up the psychology of the game, because now my deck building has to probably alter to that to now counter for certain things that these aces and what Agent was referring to, the overflow mechanic, that, can I abuse that in a certain way? All of those things now you get to take into account, regardless of what they do to the game. I have to now add that to quote unquote my bag of tricks whenever I'm building my deck, and now when I enter into a game. So I'm all for it. I'm totally for it. If nothing else, at the bare minimum, and I'll say this till the cows come home, it prevents staleness in the game, because it's just new things that we have to account for. It's new things that we get to experience, and it keeps the game fresh, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to that point, like talking about Dragon Ball and keeping things fresh, like when it comes to like these counters, it's also I think gonna open up a lot for rogue decks because I feel like Dragon Ball, and granted the game's like 5 years old, but like I feel like it has so many rogue decks. When you look at some of these top 16s, you're like, what the hell? Like it's just the pie chart be, you have like the 2 top tier decks, but then on the other side you have like 8 others. You're like, what the hell is this? Which we do not have in Digimon at all. But like I think that now with like the ace, you could say, well, I don't want to build my deck with any aces. Instead, I'm going to put cards that strip out sources. And because of that, I'm just going to gain advantage because if you're somebody who's abusing the ace mechanic and the counter mechanic, cool, here's a Sword Joe. I'm just going to strip out, your source. And now, like, your ace, if it doesn't go past level 6, cool, I'm just going to gain memory when it dies. So I think and I think even the level 5s, like the Zudomon, regardless of whether it's under something, you still are going to lose memory from the overflow mechanic. So you can make things like Gaia Force become viable again, because now instead of it costing me 8, it'll cost me 5 or whatever the amount is after my opponent loses memory. So that I think is just gonna be interesting in like how you build your deck and like really paying attention to what are other people doing, because I've seen, looking at some of these aces, like looking at it on my phone, the Zudomon seems like a really interesting kind of answer to Blast Digivolution itself, right? Because you go into this thing and then it trashes Digivolution cards from your opponent's Digimon. So if they've gone into their ace first and then they evolve, let's say on top of that with like a level 6, you can then strip out those 2 sources and make that evolution free from the overflow mechanic. It's very interesting like how these interactions are going to go, and after playing so much Dragon Ball, especially with like Tarkara, Sarge, I guess Dan, like it's been a lot of fun to just see the interactivity, and I'm excited for Digimon players to experience that as well. I'm sure some people are going to say F this game because like that's not what they signed up for, and that's fine. Like it is what it is. Like we all have our preferences. If that's not something you like it is what it is. But I think that for the people who stick around and really kind of dive into it, I think people will enjoy it, personally.
Yeah, player prioritization, right? Like, hopefully you want a little bit of interaction. What's nice about the counter, to say more on that, is the counter mechanics already kind of existed. We have these, like, when something happens on your field that becomes an interruptive effect. So this doesn't feel wildly out of place. But I also like that they fit this in between end of attack effects. Stuff like Alphamon or the new Imperial Dramon coming out, they have end of attack. So if you have the counter step, you're acknowledging that it's like when attacking, when attacked, end of attack. So we now have these 3 clear stages that they can kind of play around and do some cool mechanics in. To touch on your point about option cards being cheaper, I also thought about this with how blue feels underwhelming with stripping sources. Being rewarded for doing things you're already doing, or buffing mechanics that already exist by giving them more value, seems really cool. I like that they're kind of playing around things they already have. I like the idea of like, man, does that have a level 5 and a level 6 ace? My Gaia Force is like 2 costs. Option cards have always felt wildly out of place. I also like that this is just about them leaving play, right? Like we said, stripping sources, deleting it, but bouncing it to hand, bouncing it to security. We're buffing Digivolve. Hell yeah. I'm a big advocate for that. So I do like it. It becomes this tug of war. It reminds me of super combos a little bit in Dragon Ball. You can only run a couple of them. I wonder if you'll be limited to like 4 aces in a deck. Also, because that's just a great like card reference, right? There's 4 aces in a deck. Like, I was like, man, I'd be the only one appreciating it, but I like that.
No,
I wonder.
Catchy. I like it.
I wonder if there will be a building mechanic like with Dragon Ball, which is like these cards are so strong, but once we print 20 of them, we can't have you just running 20 of them in a deck. That's too good. So I wonder if there'll be a requirement or something. And man, I gotta say, if you have a locals near you, for the pre-release of those new structure decks, there's going to be a tournament where you play one of the 2 decks. You'll get your deck most likely with entry, and then you can play with just that deck, learn the new mechanics. It's going to be a time because I expect new people at your locals. Like, this is so wildly big changes for their third year. They're obviously starting off with a bang. I hope it goes well. I really do.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing that I keep referencing, other card games, but the reason I'm bringing it up for this is the whole structure of gameplay is based off of the source material that it comes from, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at something like Pokemon, right? What happens in the Pokemon anime, right? You have two trainers, they battle, their main Pokemon, and they have their bench of reserve when one Pokemon gets knocked out, and that's exactly how the card game plays, right? You look at Dragon Ball, you have two leaders, you have two combatants at a fight that call in allies and certain energy things and certain whatever, for power-ups and super complicated. So it's like when I'm playing the game, I almost feel like I'm watching the show. But I get to play it, right? Mm-hmm. So talking about that with Digimon, regardless of whatever new mechanics they bring in, it's like when I think of what I used to watch or any type of other games that I would play or whatever, like the source material of Digimon, and I would think of Digimon digital battles. These are just continuations of what is already happening in the source material anyways. When you think of stuff like this, it's just, when we first start off the game was very basic. So it was very aligned with, season 1 and season 2 of Digimon. It was very like, you got rookie, champion, ultimate, mega or mega forms, whatever. And that was kind of it. Right. And then what do? They introduced Warp Digivolution, and they, hybrids. And then they kept going on and on to, to Frontier and all these other things. And it's like, as they go on, they are going to start integrating more complex interactions because that is where it's based from. And as an appreciator of that stuff, because I don't just play the game because I enjoy the game. I play the game because I'm nostalgic to the franchise. Mm-hmm. I like it because I get to feel like I'm like, oh, I'm back in. I'm 12 years old again. And I get to I'm actually like, what? But now I'm in control of it. So it's just it's a really cool thing to say. Look, yeah, some people might be in, some people might be out, but it's cool when they're staying. I feel like they're staying fairly true to, the nostalgia of it and the source material of it. I think it's the coolest thing.
But yeah, no, to your point, Dan, with feeling the connection to the IP, it's interesting because I feel like Digimon, Dragon Ball, probably even One Piece, and I guess Pokemon, do a really good job of emulating the source material, right, in card game format. I think this Ace Digimon idea is really freaking cool because it's it's like the ace of that tamer. It's not to be repetitive, but it is Ty's Metal Greymon, and it's this Metal Greymon that I'm about to play is the special, really cool Metal Greymon. It's almost like how it feels in Dragon Ball to drop a secret rare on somebody. It's this is the dude, and the game's over. You know what I mean? I don't think aces will feel that intense to start, because it seems like they're really easy to get rid of, at least to start. Not saying that they should add any barrier or deflect Dragon Ball-esque mechanics to Digimon, because I think that would get a little crazy. But I do think that this is the beginning of more really just kind of interesting times with how the game connects to the source material and kind of drawing from that inspiration, which I think any good card game that has that's based on an IP does that. I think they should all feel like they belong within the context of the IP that they're based on. Personally,
man, dinosaurs are just cool, eh? You'll never stop loving dinosaurs.
Pretty much.
Yeah, true that.
Pretty much.
It's definitely how I feel. I like that Ace feels like it rewards different mechanics. I do like that they feel like they're fixing some things by giving it additional rewards. I wonder, I really do want to know how low they want to go with Ace, though. So we've seen level 6s and we've seen level 5s. How far down do we go? I think becomes, I mean, it's all design questions. We have no idea what's going to happen. They might go Ace up to 7. That also seems more likely. Mm-hmm. Give some buff to some secrets and some stuff. But we have no idea.
Yeah, could you guys imagine an Ace Death Xmon?
Yes, if I could run only one of it.
Yeah, right? I do like your point about that. That like, what if? I know we're still a long ways off from like getting a full reveal and a full like working knowledge of what the ace mechanic is really going to be. But I do like the idea of limiting it because of the experience that I have with DBS now, knowing how like, could you imagine if you could just run an infinite amount of super combos in the deck? Like, for people who don't know what that is, like it enables like so much depending on how you place it, whatever. It just enables so much. So to say like, yeah, I'm gonna run. Because we don't know what else is going to be revealed, but like someone like me who loves like control type decks, right? This Magna Angemon, right? That recovers and does all this kind of crazy stuff. What if they announce other like an Angelwomon that does a similar thing, or an Ace Ophanimon that we all know like does it? Like, I do think that it could get like potentially out of hand depending on how they print that. But again, it's just one of those. It's all speculation of like, what are they going to do with it? And I have to imagine introducing a mechanic like thinking of like when they introduced Joggers for the first time, and I feel like everybody freaked out, right? Because it's like, it's not a mechanic that's lost on us, right? Because that's an early concept in the IP, so we all knew what it was, but the way they introduced it into the game, I feel like it was like, oh my gosh, it's gonna break the game. But I feel like they did a really good job balancing. I mean, how many times have you guys seen like a full-on like DNA Joggers type of format, right? So it's like, I think they're gonna follow the same type of suit with Ace, where it's like, it's a good mechanic, it definitely provides benefits, but it has an equal downside that, it just balances it really well.
100%. And I think the overflow mechanic is a good segue to kind of like making it not too busted, because it's like you could make a deck of aces, but then it's like if anything dies or gets removed from the board, that's gonna be a rough time for you. Yeah. Because like, what happens when you swing into security and your Digimon dies? It's like, cool, I've just lost a bunch of memory and I lost my ace. Like, it'll be interesting to see how that pans out in actual gameplay. Because like part of me also wonders if the overflow mechanic is gonna be like a deterrent from playing a lot of aces in and of itself. Because it's like, man, that without any extra layers of protection, it's great to be able to play my level 5 on turn 1 or turn 2. Maybe it doesn't feel as bad because, let's say I'm at 3 memory. I just give you 3 and I have a level 5 on the board. That's great. But is it when you can Gaia Force it and it's only going to cost me 4? Ultimately, right? So I don't know. I'm really curious to see what that looks like in actual gameplay. And if it's going to be like you mentioned with Jogress, where everybody's like, oh my God. And then the thing happens and it's like the worst thing was dealing with Chimeramon? Like, honestly, and even that's not that bad. So yeah,
I will say it's the one thing I find weird is Digimon seems to be defined by what's new in a format. Like hybrids proved that, Jogress proved that. I feel like Digicross proved that. I recently played with 2 very young kids. They wanted to play Digimon. I taught them on some cheap decks, and I built them like the very first set decks. There's nothing there. The game is nothing. It's I punch you with big man. Do you have anything? No. Okay, cool. Like the game feels so basic. So obviously we knew it was going to keep getting more and more complex. I like this level of interaction of like now not only like countering feels cool because you might be able to like, we didn't even talk about like Blast Evolution yet. Like Blast Evolution, the idea of you attack, I can then like just get a free Digivolve off. I feel like it speeds up turns. I feel like it hopefully has like a good enough drawback. It's got to be that the risk is worth, or the reward rather, is worth the risk of doing it. But I agree with Dan. Like I read that Magna Angemon, I'm like, okay, cool. So I run 4 Magna Angemon from the very first set. I run 4 of this Magna Angemon, then I do whatever I want with my top end. Like at least I'm gonna get something back for killing 4 of those.
Yeah, but even then, it's like if you look at the BT1 Magna, right? It's a play cost of 7. Because trust me, I'm already deep because Magna's my boy, right? I've already deep dove into
God,
so right. But so if you look at Magna, right? He's the BT1 one. He's a 7 cost on play, recover 1. Whereas the new one, it's an on play or when digivolving, recover 1 if you have 5 or less. Which in a lot of cases, I mean, it's basically as soon as you start the game, right? So unless you've already been recurring, you're typically going to get that effect off. thing to note about that is that Magna Angemon is also a hand counter blast evolution, like you were just saying. So you actually get to do that as a reactive play too, which is kind of insane. But that aside, the Magna Angemon, if I'm not mistaken, it's only a 4 cost and its overflow is -3. So just doing simple math, right? Even if you get punished by you play this thing down for 4, you get it on play, you recur 1, and then you get punished because it gets deleted and you lose 3, you're essentially paying the same amount as that BT1 Magna. So you're basically effectively playing 8 BT1 Magna Angemons. So that's what I mean is like I can see the potential for it getting out of hand, but at the same time it's kind of like I to your guys' point, I think it's like Digimon does heavily get defined by what's new and what's shiny. And every time we get this new mechanic, it's like, you know, when was the last time we saw hybrids run the form? When was the last time we saw bonds, right? When bonds came out, Gabumon was everywhere, right? This is going to come and pass too, right? My simplest way of putting it is like in any game, there's always that potential for mistakes or oopsies, if you will, from the developer on like certain game mechanics or structure or whatever. But that's only a possibility. Whereas what's a guarantee is if you don't change things up and you don't introduce new things, the game will get stale. Like that's a guarantee. So unless you're willing to try out these new things, you are just going to pass the game by because you're just going to get bored of it. So what else are you supposed to do? You know, so at that point you got to introduce new things, and some people are going to be in favor and some people are not, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, even with these timings, right, I think things like Gallantmon become more important, right? Because with the Blast Evolution, I swing, my wind attackings go off, then you get to counter and do your Blast Evolution. Well, if your body is gone, it doesn't matter, right? So, like, that also becomes a little, again, going back to deck psychology, which I think we should coin the phrase. Going back to things like that, like, when you're thinking about the meta and kind of like how you're going to be playing, what kind of decks you're going to be playing against, I think the game already has a lot of different checks and balances, and this just adds another kind of like, you know, icing on top of this multi-layered cake. So, you know, I think we'll have to obviously wait and see what kind of things come out and how this all works. Like, are counters going to go to the point where option cards have counters now? Like, is that going to be a thing? If that becomes a thing, like, what does that even look like? Like, do I counter and then I pay extra memory? Like, how would that work? In my head, option cards that do counters makes perfect sense. It's more of a question of at what point would they do that? And what do those options look like? Is it something as simple where like you make a pseudo combo system like with Dragon Ball, where you say, cool, it's like with Tamers where they are able to digimodify, and like I wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a legitimate thing. Digimodify is like a mechanic, but like you digimodify and now your Digimon gains 2k DP and I don't know, +1 security check for like the turn, but you do it during like the counter step. I don't know. I'm just kind of making stuff up, but like, will it get to that point? I think at that point is when people will start to kind of like glaze over a little bit, and that comes again back to like skill, and that adds like a new level of like deck building, and just how you play the game, and giving every deck a different play style that you can choose from, even if it's the exact same list, you know? Right.
I mean, they start to feel really splashable. Like, why am I not running Magna Angemon in most decks? If I just could. So I feel like the idea of limitation kind of looms in my brain of like what they're gonna do with it, especially because we base it off the sister game beforehand.
Yeah.
Along with that line, I wonder. Like, we haven't been mentioned. We should have that countering is once per attack.
Yes.
So I also like that it puts choice back into the player's hand again. Are we blast evolving? Are we potentially playing something else? Are we using its other mechanic? That's going to be really cool, of like having the choice of like, oh, you know, I might lose this body, or this becomes almost like combat tricks in Magic or in Dragon Ball, where like, oh, you think you're more powerful than me, but I can sacrifice something in my hand, potentially get above you, and then put the onus back on you to, can you continue? And hopefully this kind of discourages, it feels like both a catch-up mechanic and a mechanic where you can throw more with. They almost want you to go wide with some of these. It seems like with the level 5 or the level 6, because they're only 6 costs. Like 3 costs to Digivolve, 6 costs to just put on the field. If you and your opponent both have a tamer, it's essentially passing a turn and putting a mega on the field, which is wacky. It has a downside, of course. But I wonder if this also tries to push away from where we're currently stuck in, which is very tower focused. And like, even to hint at later in the podcast, like BT11, I think it's gonna be a tower meta again. That's just me though. So you gotta hopefully reward it, and I like the idea that this encourage more wide board, or you feel like you can come back in a game where you're like, okay, I need to put 2 bodies on the field, but if I put rookies down, they're just going to die. Okay, like I'm putting my ace down. I'm hoping that that is enough that if I survive the attack, I win on the crackback.
Right. Yeah. I did. That wasn't even something that I really considered, but yeah, to that thing is ever since really BT9, we've been in that, in to stay true to like Digimon's inception of the game as a whole, like where it's just, it's level 3, level 4, level 5, and so on. It's like, like you said earlier, Frawley, it's like I hit you, you hit me kind of thing. We've gotten kind of really back to that because of the fact that those tower decks are so strong. There are other but there's other different caveats to that, but at the same time, it's like for the most part, most of the decks are do that, which is fine. You can have that as part of the game, but I think one thing that Digimon thrives on is being a multifaceted TCG, right? Where you have decks that do so many different things, as opposed to a game like Pokemon, right? Where Pokemon has certain play styles or whatever, but for the most part, like there's no real different way to play the game. Like you're not gonna have to, like the whole point of Pokemon is it's a setup game. Like I said, I get my setup, I get my board established, and then I just play my play to my win con, right? Where I know Digimon essentially is the same thing, but it you can do it so many different ways. There's not a singular like I need to build a stack in order to win the game, right? I could win the game without ever building a single stack. And I think being able to do it with something like these ace mechanics or overflow or burst evolution and whatever else they come with down the line, just it allows for them to abstain from saying this is the only way to play the game. Mm-hmm. There are so many other ways to play the game, which allows for variety. And again, to that devil's advocacy is some people are not going to like that because they want to play the game a certain way. It's like, but you can still do that. They just don't want to account for, the other ways that have been adopted into what the game structure is. So I'm all for a game that just allows for basically an infinite number of sounds super cheesy, but an infinite number of possibilities, right? Like you can literally just whatever you can put together that can flow, that I've found with Digimon will work. Mm-hmm. So I love that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's going to add a lot, and I'm really looking forward to what we're going to see out of Japan, because obviously they're going to get it well before we do. With I guess, what is that, BT14 for them? Yeah, BT14. I'm really curious to see what that looks like. But speaking of
literally just called Blast Ace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's also weird to think that, like, damn, we're on like BT14. Like, what the hell?
That's not including side sets.
Yeah.
There's been 3 side sets. We're really on the 7th. That will be the 17th set.
17th set.
Yeah.
Like, geez, 18th because we got EX4.
18th.
EX4.
Yeah. Yep.
It's nuts, dude. It's. But speaking of next set, BT12. I know I've been waiting for this set. I feel like we all have, because there's been a downtick in how much Digimon we play every single day, because this format has been going for a minute. Where to start with BT12? Is there an archetype, a card, and anything that you guys are excited about for BT12 aside from the whole set? Like, is there anything in particular? If nobody has an immediate answer, I have a few.
Oh, you go for it. I know you're chomping at the bit for this one.
You go first, but I got a suspicion I know what it is.
It's Greymon, boys. It's the Greymon stuff. War Greymon. Listen, I mentioned it before. What I think I love about this set as a whole is that old stuff comes back. All the protagonist Digimon come back. So there's gonna be some protagonist card tax for those alt arts. Just keep that in mind. Just know that will be a thing. But I love that this set is giving you the option to really tap into nostalgia of certain cards, and then providing new shit that, like, I don't even know what the hell, like Quartzmon. I don't even know what the hell that is, but I read it today. I was like, this is disgusting. I don't like it. Please.
You just read it?
I just read it because, like, Dan had mentioned it to me a couple days ago, and I was like, whatever. And I read it today and was like, oh, cool. So, F green. I'm not gonna have a good time, and the fact that it's not just green because it evolves off like 4 colors.
Green, black, white.
Oh, and 9 from a level 5 with save, so it could literally be any save level 5.
Disgusting. It's disgusting.
Yep.
So I think this set for 12 is gonna. Again, I'm most excited for War Greymon stuff because I think there's like 10 different ways to build the deck now because we finally have those dual colors. I've shared my list in my Discord, so you know if you guys are listening to this, you're not in the Discord. What are you doing? It's in the description. Go join it. But and share your list. But yeah, that's. I'm gonna stop gushing about Greymon and just. I'm gonna take a step back now.
No, you're good. You're good. Because I'm just gonna echo that point. Of course, I'm excited for Greymon stuff too. You know, it's the OG, right? Like you can't not be excited for Greymon. But to spin off of that, I'm just kind of like looking through. I've got the whole set list up, and it's interesting to see that we don't like really get like any particular full deck. What I love about this set, as opposed to the last couple full sets that we've gotten, is that it adds support to so many different archetypes. Because I'm just gonna run through this just real quick, just to kind of give you guys an idea. So Gallantmon gets a new line, Red Hybrid gets a new line, Imperial gets a new line. We get Geo Gray, Rise Gray, Shine, new line there. Of course, we get all of the Green Hunter stuff with the Quartzmon, the new Greymon stuff. We get a new Chaos Dramon X antibody that's going to make Machine Dramon, I think, a little bit more viable. Mm-hmm. We get all new, which is crazy because we just got all like a crazy new deck with it. But Beelzemon's going to get infinitely better in this set. And then you've got, and mind you, I'm skipping over a couple to save time. But then, of course, you've got the secret rare in Cross 7 Superior mode, which can not only just be splashed in Cross, but you can put that in blue hybrid or blue flare. You can put it in Merva. Like, there's a couple different things that you can put it in. So it's like that's just a very hyphenated list of all the decks that are getting support. So it's like rather than just seeing a set that's like we get all of these obscure cards and then 1 or 2 decks get support. So that's basically all you're going to see. There is going to be something for every single color, and some colors even get 2 different archetype support. So it's like I'm excited not just necessarily for a particular archetype, but for hopefully how open it spreads the format. Because I'm hoping that it's just going to allow for so much more versatility, and I'm like, man, I'm here for that.
So it's really strange because normally I feel like I'm daydreaming of 3 to 4 different decks in the sets that are coming out. And this one, though there's some fun stuff, I do feel a little underwhelming. I'm going to play a game with you guys quickly. Which Digimon do you think has the worst name in this whole set? And I'll give you 2 examples. There is Lampmon and there is Footmon. Like, who's got the worst name?
Yeah.
Footmon's literally part of a Pulsemon line.
Oh my god. Yo, I forgot all about well, I said Pulsemon, honestly. Yeah, some of these guys do have some interesting name choices.
Well, you got an Opossumon in there too.
Thank you.
You're
right.
Looking at some of these
Man's
names,
got balloons.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, like I said, there's some obscure ones, but I mean,
it's a weird one. I will say I am excited. Obviously, let's just get Greymon out of the way. That's cool. 100%. Ancient Wisemon, really weird. Glad Chaos Chaos Dramon X Antibodies coming out. Machine Dramon's gonna be really cool. You mentioned on the support. I mentioned earlier that I thought they were gonna tone down on X Antibody by only giving all force hits top end. But you have Beelzemon's full line in X Antibody, so I hope you're ready to fight that. Because that's going to be everywhere. Crazy structure deck release followed by, hey, here's X Antibody, run cool boy, have good time. I don't know. I'm so torn on this set. Quartzmon, Boogeyman the format, Um,
Mm-hmm.
I already looked up the rulings for Japan. What happens if there's 2 Quartzmon on the field?
Mm.
Oh,
Nobody
yeah.
unsuspends. If you have 2 Quartzmon on your field, nothing unsuspends. The tower meta situation is going to be wacky. I expect removal. I expect Digivolve, bounce, anything to get rid of Quartzmon. I will say I do love that Quartz is targeting what feels like the 3 weakest. It's besides the save, which definitely covers it, gives it way more options. It's giving green something, it's giving black something, and it's giving white something. This feels like Eosmon, Diaboromon, Galacticmon support. This is I want to slow down the meta. I want to grind out a little bit with you. You've committed so to the board and I can't remove it. Cool. Everything's tapped.
Mhm.
Deal with my man and unless you want things to be able to unsuspend. So, man, I don't even know what to do with Quartzmon. I feel like it's going to be a very, very like
I have a very specific yellow purple option to deal with it very quickly.
sure. There's going to be things you're going to have to run.
Well,
removal.
but that's the only way to get rid of it, right? is straight up removal because you can't swing into it if you can't untap. You know.
And Quartz should
Now-
be an ace just for like being rewarded for removing it.
Now, and I'm just looking because I'm reading through this one too, and because I already kind of knew about it, but it does not apply to Digimon in your opponent's raising area. So, like, if I have like say you're playing Black War, and I'm like, okay, well, I know Quartz is on the field, so basically all I have to do is go into like a big stack in the back with the metal gray and heritable, and then I push that out and then just swing over it. It's basically like one of the ways you can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, even just to like finish up, I like the fact that this is going to punish both unsuspend decks, because it feels like, oh wait, I play all force, doesn't matter, I play a tamer. It's like no, you do not unsuspend. No reboot, no like I unsuspend because blank. You don't unsuspend.
Yeah. And what's also interesting too with this is that like it's hitting tamers with like this suspend. It's like, oh my god, like that's a well, I don't know if I'd call it a blessing because I feel like this card's gonna make me want to flip tables, but like the fact that it's gonna suspend down tamers is really interesting. But also what's interesting about that is I wonder how it would be playing Quartzmon against like the new Shine Gray stuff, because maybe that I'm thinking of EX4, but there's like a bunch of different effects that go off if Margus gets suspended. Maybe it's the EX4 one that I'm thinking of. So it'll be interesting to see how Quartzmon interacts as it ages. If it will be like a Death X where like it's just always around, or if it's gonna be like, okay, it's served its purpose and you see less of it. I don't know. I'm just curious to see what it's gonna look like.
I do think it's funny that people are talking so much more about a super rare than any of the secrets in the set or anything else. Like Quartzmon's all I've heard about.
Yeah.
Well, because obviously, like Frawley, you had mentioned it definitely enables certain things with black and white decks, but the fact that green, I feel like green is kind of getting back to, at least for me anyways, is what I got into. Green's getting back to its roots, which is more of a control-y style deck, right? Because my introduction to green decks was Reflecimon and Nidhogg, so it was very much board control. It's very much like, I'm going to tap your stuff down. I'm going to, you play the Argomon that taps down tamers and they can't unsuspend, like those type of things. And don't get me wrong, Grandis has definitely had its day in the sun. I think it's going to continue to thrive just because it's just that good of a deck. But seeing something like Quartzmon and the support that it comes along with it in this set, it's like, it's nice that green is kind of coming back to that more control-y aspect and more of like a, more of an interactive type of play style rather than just like, if you can't beat me before I get my stack out, you're done.
Right.
So I love that. I do.
Yeah, that's a cool change for green in particular. I know, I wanted to love green so much because like it felt like something I would really like, and then it wasn't. But for like people who play green, I think that's pretty cool to have like a 7 that's good and like really good. It's gonna be weird because I think it's gonna be a terrorist for Ulti Cup format in June. I think the June Ulti Cup. I'm not excited about that at all because of Quartzmon, because I think you'll see that everywhere with like Bloom Hydra. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
It feels like the colors that needed it though, and I
Yeah.
agree. Like it's like green needs setup. Cool. This enables setup. Are you being rushed down? We need a tap out. Especially too because we mentioned in the last show with the black or gray Shoutmon debate, like tamers are very powerful to have on the field. Having a way of maybe not removing them, but disabling them a little bit seems like the better option. I also like that it feels like the buy me a turn card. It feels like old what was that called? Breath of the Gods or whatever, where it's like, okay, I have a turn. I guarantee I have a turn. Like, you're gonna remove this thing. It cost me 7 to go into it, or 9 if I went off a level 5. So if you remove it, like most likely I just go back to my turn, but I stopped you. I guess my question is like besides Black or Greymon, is there anything else you're like very excited to play? Or do you feel like this is gonna be more of a toolbox format where you're like, I'm taking pieces from this and putting them into stuff I already love?
I think for me, Dan, unless you, you're
No, go ahead.
okay.
You are. I'm like scrolling through at the same time to try to like come up with
think
something.
For me, it's gonna be a toolboxy format. I think my main like priority will be War Greymon builds, because I think that there's something here for War Greymon. There's something here for Gaiomon / Black War Greymon X / Black War Greymon. I think that for me, I think that's gonna be my focus. I think though for everyone else, like Gallantmon will be fun. I particularly don't like Gallantmon as much as I would like, because I feel like Gallantmon is an archetype. There are too many other red options that I'd rather play that I feel like do what Gallantmon does better. But that's just me. I think Gallantmon's great in an Ulti Cup format, but outside of that, like I don't jive with it. That just probably could be a me problem. I think the Ulforce having access to an X antibody variant is cool. The Imperial Dramon deck looks pretty cool. I think that there are a lot of decks. I just think for me personally, I'm going to be doing a lot for Wargray, because I'm also looking ahead at EX4, which has more support that I'm like, okay, cool. I can take these cards and either build a new deck or bring them into what I'm already building.
Yeah, I think to that end is I almost feel like, as good as this set is and how many different pieces, as I mentioned, that it's providing, I think that this almost feels like a part 1 set, whereas EX4 feels like the second part of it, right? Because like I'm excited to try, the new Rise and Shine stuff, but I coined that the other day when I was building it. I was like, oh, this is gonna be a good Rise and Shine deck, and then I just like clicked like, oh, that's what it says. So, anyways, thought that was a funny term. But looking at it, I was like, okay, the deck's cool and all, and there's some pieces that you can use. You got the red Taikari, and you got you have a memory setter Marcus already in the red one. But it's not till EX4 that you actually get the even better Marcus Tamer. It's a 5-drop, but it's the better one, right? So it's like, yeah, it's cool. I can play the Shine deck now, when BT12 comes out. It'll be fun, it'll be cool, but it's not really going to get full powered until then. The same way with the War Gray stuff. It's like, yeah, the War Gray deck's going to be good, but it gets even better, it gets more stuff, and along with some other things, you know what I mean? So it's like, without delving too far into what all EX4 has, because that's a second set away, it almost feels like I'm excited for this set, but I almost want to combine it with EX4 and be like, now we've got everything, to really say, this is what I'm excited for to play. You know what I mean? So yeah, to Agent's point, I think it's going to be more just toolboxy for me. It's like, slotting things in, changing certain cards out, and I think the big bad boogeyman is going to be the Quartz mod for this set, which I'm all for. I think every set really does need to have one. It needs to have a big brother to say, look, I'm going to keep everybody in line, because you can't get too out of hand. So
I think I very much agree with both of you. I think this is toolboxy. I think this is the first time I've been excited to play Imperial Dramon. Just for the fact that I'm probably gonna put red and purple fighter mode in it and paladin mode in it, because I can, and that sounds wacky. The ability to do like end of attack shenanigans and do a little bit of Nidhogg stuff does feel fun. The grossest thing about that, if you don't run paladin, is if you just run fighter mode, you can still go into Quartz, because hey, it's blue-green. That feels like, hey, a deck that's fun, abusable, and can use Quartzmon. Like, so far, when I go to my regional, that's like one of the first things I'm thinking. It seems the most abusable. And then Beelza X, I don't have love for Beelzemon, and that's gonna get me some hate, but I am kind of excited to see what this X antibody variant does, because I'm a little spooked of it. I feel like he's got so much to work with in such a short period of time, and I've even seen like a Beelzemon BL Star variants where they run like a little bit of it, or the new Beelzemon deck going around that's only level 3s, level 4s, like 2 Ballmons, and then all level 5s, level 7s, or like sorry, all level 6s, level 7s, where you're just warping and making sure you trash 20 cards and like everything gets online at that point. So I'm not excited to play it, but that is something I think I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I keep bringing up Dragon Ball, and I will because it's a Bandai game, so I don't feel bad about
And
it.
I will.
But but I think that like Dragon Ball is doing this thing, or has done this thing forever, where like every set is really builds on top of the last set, right? Which like it's like a no shit statement, but like when you see it in practice, I feel like Digimon is a game where a lot of times it's like what decks really make it from set to set to set, right? I feel like a lot of decks is just like that gets thrown out and you don't see it again ever. Or like you see random cards from it, 4 or 5 sets later. But I feel like Digimon is starting to get more to this point where like decks survive formats and continue to see either support or cards that could be used in it that make it continually make it viable. And that's the thing I like about 12 and EX4 and even BT13, just kind of looking in the future, is that like all of those sets don't invalidate decks that exist. If anything, they provide new options and then give you more tools for what you may have been playing 2 or 3 sets ago. And I think that in card games, personally, that's the best way to keep people around and also make it so that people aren't kind of like cost gated or priced out of the game. So I love that Digimon seems to be going in this direction. Hopefully BT14 continues to prove that point. But I think like for me, that's what I always look for in a game. Like with Dragon Ball, that is what got me into I'm building something yellow right now, literally because for the next set I saw a bunch of Goku and Vegeta cards that could work for what I'm building right now, and I'm like, oh shit, like this, like with Dragon Ball I think it's very easy because they have a leader system, but I like that Digimon is starting to blanket a little more of the love in each set. At least it seems that way.
Yeah, I think I'll actually speak personally on that, because there's like, for me, and I think I can speak for the vast majority when I say like, because Digimon has not just a color archetype system, but we did this, I think it was actually the first episode we talked about this, where like each color has like its own specific type of play style, more or less, right? Red, aggro, purple, yellow is typically a little more defensive, control-y, combo-y, whatever. What happens when a card game, even if it's unintentional, phases out a specific deck or even a full-on color sometimes, because what they bring in is just power creeps it out or whatever the case may be. If you're somebody who only likes to play a specific archetype or a specific play style or specific color even, and your color is no longer viable, that person's just not going to play the game until that color comes back. And sometimes it could be 4 or 5 sets later. And by then you're like, I feel like I'm just getting into the game like for the first time, because everything's changed so much. So if you're able to figure out a way, and you don't have to have a consistent format where it's like format to format, you have to make sure you maintain a certain quota of 3 decks per color or whatever. It's right. Like I can have 4 purple decks this format, and then for the next 2 formats only 1 gets through. But at least if you have 1 purple deck, you can have somebody that's like, okay, I'll hang on while this one purple deck survives until we get more support. Because I remember I used to love running Lilith Loop, back in the day, and I feel like Beelzemon is arguably the first real like competitive purple deck since like old school Lilith Loop, right? So it's like when you think about the discrepancy in time between those two versus the most recent competitive red deck versus the last most competitive red deck or blue deck even, there's just no comparison, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think being able to start it looks like, to Agent's point, to this shift of trying to just keep some kind of consistency from set to set is also just going to help with the longevity of the game and like player retention, hopefully.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's a level of like Sarismon where we never saw it again. It doesn't exist for some players. And then you have like favorite decks that aren't maybe the most powerful, but like I think I've played Commandramon every format since it's come out. And then I tinker with it, right? Like, oh, sudden, oh, okay, new support, cool. I put new stuff into it because it's a deck I like to mess with. And then you have like Greymon, where it's like, cool, I always have this just about, or the pieces or the things for it. And it might go Ancient Emperor, but like it's got Greymon in the name. I've got stuff for it.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of weird. I do like the idea of like looking back at older cards and being like, oh, like cool. Like this is the first time Mirage Gaugamon hasn't been like a super big joke since like it's one really good performance.
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool. Like people are going to play Mirage Gaugamon. It is kind of weird to see the support, but I do agree. I think there's stuff that even though things pass by the wayside, if you find something you gel with, hopefully it gives some longevity and puts it back into these decks. And then also, like just to touch on EX4, like we were saying, like the rabbit decks in there, the ability of using either kind of rabbit you like and going the way you want and building the color you want, or going like a 5-color deck. I hope to see more stuff like that where it's like, cool, not that you were underserved, but like, or even these blanket ones with Yggdrasil, where we're using all the Royal Knights, but we're not necessarily giving them like a full line. Like I think Jessamon and Gallantmon get a line in that one. But I love the idea of like, because this Omnimon works with Yggdrasil does not mean it won't go into an Omnimon deck. Or it doesn't mean that piece isn't like takeable and just moving and cramming into another archetype. And without it always having to tie into itself, also allows you to print some wackier stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's just like, this is your line, this is your rookie, this is your champion, this is your ultimate. Sure, but the just one random top end Gallantmon that now could be your new top end feels like giving key pieces that could be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that like that helps the game a lot because we don't have a leader system, right? We have, it's very much like a more traditional card. I don't even know what the fuck you'd call it, but like we don't have a leader system, so it kind of like changes. Like making the cards go from set to set is a much different process than like Yu-Gi-Oh, where like there's a whole archetypes that just disappear. They you never see them again. You don't even like new people have probably never heard of like Burning Abyss or some of these other things from back in the day. And when they do come back, it's like Necro Valley or Gravekeepers, where it's like 10 years later. You missed the whole boat. You never even saw the episode on Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. You don't even know what Necro Valley is, So,
Yu-Gi boomers, do I have something for you?
It's like it's finding a balance between that, because I think that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically has always blown my mind of like how there's just now new black
Red Eye support?
Red Eyes, but the Blackluster Soldier. Like I saw somebody post on Facebook about pulling some. I was like, "What, that Blackluster Soldier? Like, what?" And it's like a ritual card.
That's my day. That was that's back in my time, man.
Buying the starter deck with
starter deck Blackluster. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was so confused. But I mean, I guess 20 years later, I guess good for us. I don't play the game anymore, but and I like that Digimon is not that, right? That it is really kind of like shotgunning some of these archetypes and giving you the option to say, here, take this Quartzmon and stick it in whatever you want, or Death X, stick it in whatever you want, right? I like that personally.
Yeah, because it does it makes decks that like might be like your pet deck, but isn't really viable in a competitive aspect, right? We can play a casual, local, whatever all day long, but if you really want to do something even slightly competitive with it, it's like, well, I don't have that one thing that's gonna like push it over the edge or get it there. But it's like, well, if we print a multicolored card or like a Death X, like a universal card that could be that like gives you that kind of little bit of extra power level, well, now I can play it because now I've got that kind of like, for lack of a better way of saying it, my ace card without it actually being an ace yet, but like that type of trump card in a way to now say, oh, okay, now like if that comes up, I can still stay in the game rather than just getting rolled because your deck like does everything against mine, right? So yeah, I think if Digimon weren't to do that, it almost inadvertently would feel like the Pokemon system, where Pokemon is one of those games, as opposed to every other game, that has a rotation system. They just experienced it, and it's like cool, like that's fine and all, but for someone like me, like I was playing competitive, and in order to stay current, you're constantly having to like basically redo your entire collection every year to 2 years, because all these cards just are irrelevant now, you know. Where it's with Digimon, it's like, sure, if a you know, a card is like kind of just lingering or whatever, it's always going to be kind of in the rotation of being playable. So when you see these new cards come out like this that are like, oh, just splash it in if the only real requirement is if it has this in its traits, or if it's, you know, this with a name or whatever. It doesn't say color, it doesn't say, you know, specific line or whatever. I think Digimon does do a pretty good job of that, and they're only going to keep doing that with all the new mechanics and everything, all the other stuff we talked about, previously. Is they're just going to continue to do that.
Yeah, I think some stuff has to fall by the wayside just by nature of like how much stuff we print, how much stuff we do. But yeah, hopefully that there's always something for you to hold on to, or like be able to mess around with. And I also like that, like we obviously we're always going to print new and more powerful stuff, because we don't want someone to be able to build commons and win things, just to keep the card game going. But I do like that I like to see what I like to call like activator cards, like a card like Kazu in a side set where I'm like, ooh, wait, everything in the deck I like is Cyborg. That goes in there. It also, I think, keeps you looking back. The amount of new players I have who have looked back at like the original sets, besides the obvious stuff like the draw 2 discard 1 Gabu. Like some people just didn't know about that, and I'm like, that's such a good card, you should get your hands on it. So sometimes there's just activators, or like I like stuff that makes you dig and you go, well, like, I mean, and maybe that's just like a deck building standpoint, where I like to sit there, bring up all the cards that are viable or a thing or tie into something, and then try to make something work. But yeah, the idea, we always want to keep the flame of old things alive, or at least like on that edge of compatibility.
Yeah, 100%. You know, let people have their pet decks and let them be, you know, something you can do stuff with. But yeah, no, guys. I mean, does anybody have any other thoughts for BT12? I know we could probably get into EX4 and 13 and all this other shit, but we'll save that obviously for.
I'm trying so hard not to.
We could save that. But does anybody have any other thoughts for BT12?
I think without delving into the like current state of things, I'm curious to see, because they already announced is it June or July? Probably you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but June or July regionals as well, and Ulti Cups, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so April and May are the ones that are currently being done. So people are currently applying for June and July.
So it's going to be interesting to see, well, the April ones, because I know that, and I know agents signed up for one too, but we're signed up for the couple regionals towards the end of April, but before BT12 actually releases. But the regionals that are occurring in May that have already done registration, and the ones coming up June and July, and then of course Ulti Cup with its modified rules. I'm just curious to see what BT12 does for that, because we already know what BT11 is going to be. We've already seen a couple regions, you know, whatever, with BT11. We've played the format for long enough. We know what that landscape looks like. I'm just really curious to see what ends up shaking out, because as with everything, there's so much speculation on this deck, that deck, this card, whatever. But with all of the toolboxy nature that we talked about or whatever, it's going to be really interesting to see what out of this set gets added to old stuff, what really old stuff potentially comes out of the woodworks. I'm really excited to see with those big events, really, because you get to see everything, right? You get 500 plus people coming to them. You're bound to see something interesting.
Yeah, I think it's like super last thoughts. I'm super hyped for the Blitz Omni box topper. It's good to get that in the hands of other players. I think it's really cool art. I'm very excited for it. I'm also glad we're still doing these new hyper chase for the secrets, where the secrets not only have an alt art, but have a altered alt art that is either all gold if it's the Shoutmon, or like black and purple, I believe, or just darker for the Darkness Bogremon. I like the idea of keeping up these nice weird rarity hits to keep people digging into stuff, because a lot of the alt arts are gorgeous in the set. Alter Quartzmon being one of my personal favorites, honestly. Looks very alien and scary. So like I like the idea that they're just keeping up incentives and doing stuff like that. And the box topper, though I wish it was like a set to collect, I'm also like, please get that in the hands of people. Oh, and oh my god, security Digimon. Security Digimon, your box toppers.
Yeah.
Itmon's about to pop off. I'm so scared.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love, and I'm gonna fuck it. I'm just gonna keep bringing up Dragon Ball because at this point, like, I play both competitively, like almost.
Anyways, welcome to Dragon Ball Cast.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, right.
I do.
Well, you did say at the beginning of all this we could be talking about other games down the line, so here it is.
I did.
Know, like
so here it is. Look, we gonna get Frothy up in here next. We already roped in Dan. He's got some secret rares and everything, y'all. Anyway,
I got one sitting on the desk right here.
I love that like Bandai is so consistent with their roadmaps to these games. Like if you looked at, and I said this probably on record on stream years ago at this point, that like if you want to understand where Digimon is going, and this goes for now One Piece and Battle Spirits, look at Dragon Ball, because Dragon Ball has like god rares, and like they just did a collector booster box for the last booster box with all these beautiful ass alt arts for like various cards, even cards that are like rares, right? Like really good looking cards. I would not be surprised by the time Digimon hits year 5 that we start getting these sort of like altered, super beautiful ass artworks for these different cards. I mean, hell, for Digimon, they went as far as to make an artwork museum at nationals, you know? So like, I love that they're investing more time into the artwork and more time into creating chase cards, but also those cards are still accessible in like their base rarities, and you're not spending, you know, a bajillion dollars on these different things. So I don't know, I just find that really fascinating how Bandai runs their games pretty consistently. Yes, they've had a lot of failures in the past, like the past iterations of Digimon needed a lot of help, but like it seems like now whoever is on that team as far as Bandai and trading card games and that part of the company, like they know what they're doing, which makes it really hard for me to not look at Battle Spirit Saga like at all. I don't know about y'all, but I've like been tempted to dabble because it's a Bandai game.
I did try the starter decks. We got demo decks at the store, so it's not bad. It's not my cup of tea. It felt like an old school card game where you get into where like there's a lot of rules of like numbers going up and down and you losing energy and gaining energy, and I was like, oh man, I feel like I'm back learning something brand new where I have no idea what I'm doing. And my deck was pretty straightforward of just like, no, beat this man down, like get your guy out, beat him into the dust. And I'm like, oh okay, yeah, I guess so.
man. But that's it for me. Guys, do we have anything for the errata zone? Is there anything that you want to walk back or double down on from the past 2 episodes? All I gotta say is, for me, I'm a prognosticator. All right, you know, like a master out here, and I'm just happy I called out counters. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, you did. That was that was pretty spot on, because we had no indication when you called that out either. So that was good. I think for me, I think the only thing I'll go back to is the whole ban list thing, because I think maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. I feel like I was now thinking back on it, that I was a little overly critical with my takes on it. But I think, again, you know, hindsight's 2020. Just thinking back on it, I'm like, I'm perfectly okay with what we ended up with. So I think what I'm gonna do with taking this is take that perspective into, ban lists are always going to be a thing, into future projections of ban lists every time we start getting announcements and everything, and be a little bit more open-minded and a little bit more like try to see it from a certain perspective rather than just like my preference, right? So I think that would be the only thing that if I had to like quote unquote errata anything from the last one, is just be a little bit more enlightened on my critique of what should have been banned.
So it's so funny you say that, because I looked at the last time something got banned and like limited, and we had it kind of in the middle where like it announced that some stuff was getting limited, but some stuff would be limited come the next set. That happened like the next set afterwards. So as much as people are like, oh, the ban list, it wasn't that big, I wonder if we have something cooking afterwards, or they're like, cool, and now we've looked at it since the problem's gone, this and this go too. Or they prune the tree a little bit, you know? Right. I don't have an errata for you guys, but I do have the question: did either of you fall for the Bandai April Fool's joke?
No, I don't even think
I don't know if I saw it.
So
Yeah.
Bandai announced that any card that has the O1 stamp, so if you look at a card, it's set, so like BT11, common, whatever, directly under that will be an O1 or an O2, or like nothing if it's an early starter deck. They said that all cards that were O1 were going to be banned, like rotated out.
Oh man, I probably would have lost it.
And I contemplated for a minute where I'm like, no. Like, I felt so deflated. I should preface, the only reason I fell for this April Fool's, the only reason, is time zones. I read this at 8 p.m. my time the day before April Fool's. And then had to have people the next day be like, dude, Japan's already there. They're already in April Fool's. And I'm like, oh my god. There was a night I went to bed where I'm like, am I gonna play Digimon still? And then I woke up the next day and I'm like, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I didn't even see that. I'm glad I did it because I would have lost it. Probably would have lost it.
We would have had a podcast right then and there.
Yeah. Emergency live session immediately.
Oh man. Oh, that's actually nuts. That's actually nuts. No, I don't know how I missed that. I'm glad I did, but I don't know how I missed that.
we would have rage quit immediately and be like, we're Dragon Ball mains immediately. We're done. We're done.
Screw this game, man. It's a joke, but I'm totally serious. If they entered the rotation, y'all, I'm probably done playing this fucking game.
It was the one thing that like could get me to like think about it.
Yeah.
Like nothing else has been good enough for me to think about it. That was the first one where I went, oh no.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons why. I mean, one of the reasons why I can't bring myself to really full delve into Pokemon again. I can't wrap my head around the rotation thing. I think it's healthy for the game, but man, it's the cost to entry, dude. It's really rough. So I'm like, yeah, if Digimon ever did that, bro, I've got boxes upon boxes of Digimon bulk, and it's like I know about 60% of them probably have an 01 on there. I'd have been just like, well,
I think it was like from BT4 to BT9. Like it was a chunk. I actually looked it up because I was like, wait, which one?
Yeah, that would have been rough.
I will say I do pray that you guys get like Pokemon Commander, where they give you a version where like there's like crazy weird deck construction. You have one Pokemon you build around, but something that would give like really old Pokemon besides like Legacy.
Well, so they do technically. It's kind of I'll give a quick shout out. I mean, he's anyway. Andrew Mahone. He's one of the biggest probably Pokemon content creators. He's been out for a long time. He goes by Tricky Jim. He actually created his own format it's been around for a little over a year now, but that is actually seeing official play in Pokemon regionals and ICs and everything. It's called Gym Leader Challenge format, and it's really cool. Yeah, so that he actually created that as a result of getting burnt out on standard format in Pokemon. So the premise of it basically is it's a monocolor singleton format where you can only play one of each card other than your basic energy, and you can only play one type of Pokemon. So like if you choose a grass deck, it can only be grass. If it's fire, it can only be fire. So it's like it's really cool because you can and it's basically unlimited. There are certain like ban cards or whatever to like, to balance it out. But the cool thing is it does provide this alternative format that it can still be competitive, but it's like you can have cards like players that have been playing the game's been around for 20 plus years. Players that have accumulated all of these cards and don't know what to do with them are now viable again. So it's really cool that something like that happens. So it's like that's a reason to kind of get into Pokemon to like do that. But until that if it ever does, format becomes official and we're still stuck on this standard thing, I don't really want to have to like keep going through the rotation of cards over and over again. So anyway, I know that could be a whole subject of itself, but I would have been a little sad if Digimon announced the rotation.
Been crying on stream, y'all.
Yeah, 100%. Y'all have seen some tears.
It would have been tragic as hell, man. Anyway, on that note, thanks, Frawley. I think we're going to wrap it for tonight. This episode's been about 90 minutes, but really appreciate you guys listening, and obviously Frawley and Dan, I always appreciate you guys coming on, and so we can talk about nerd shit. So,
love it.
Look forward to it like every month, my friend.
Heck yeah.
So we'll see y'all next month. Let us know about your pulls for BT12 when that comes around. Let us know what you're thinking about building, all the card game shit. Let us know in the comment section, in Discord, wherever you can find us. Feel free to hit us up. And we'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.
I could use Simi Bandai.